Good morning again. If you're just joining us, welcome. And if you've joined our previous sessions, welcome back. So far today, we've met many outstanding presenters and panelists with more to come. You will find ways to connect with our speakers through their websites and LinkedIn accounts in our printed program booklet, as well as on the event website. Be sure to use those resources to learn more and to connect. We're going to jump right in with our next session. Please welcome Justin Strayhorn, an attorney at Brown & Crouppen, a longtime supporter of the conference, to introduce our next guest.
Sir. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So as Vincent mentioned, my name is Justin Strayhorn, and I'm an attorney with Brown & Crouppen. We also have some Brown & Crouppen staff sprinkled out in the crowd. But so again, as Vincent mentioned, Brown & Crouppen has been a proud sponsor of this DEI conference for several years. I'm also very glad to be here on behalf of the firm to introduce the next session that's titled Philanthropy, Redefined, Navigating the Supreme Court's Affirmative Action Decision in Philanthropy and Community Engagement. While not as readily visible, philanthropy is yet another area impacted by the Supreme Court's ruling. This discussion will examine its ripple effect on donors, philanthropy, higher education, and community organizations. Our expert panel will explore the evolving dynamics and challenges that philanthropic entities face in supporting diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives amidst the changing legal landscape. We are pleased to also have David Stiffler, who's the Director of Community Relations for Edward Jones, joining us as the moderator. Okay, and so what I also do now is introduce our outstanding panel of community leaders. First, we have Dr. Kelvin Adams, who is the President and CEO of the St. Louis Community Foundation. We have, okay, applause. Well deserved. We also have Jennifer Bell, who's the Director of Financial Aid at Webster University. We have Vanessa Cooksey, who's the President and CEO of the Regional Arts Commission of St. Louis. And last but not least, we have Faith Sandler, who's the Executive Director of the Scholarship Foundation of St. Louis. And so, David, I will turn it over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, and good morning.
David, give me one quick second.
Sure.
If you all wouldn't mind, if it's possible for you to slide in some, please do so that as guests arrive later, they can easily find a seat. Thanks.
Excellent. Well, why don't we jump in by having our panelists describe in 3 minutes or less what their organization is about, and then we'll move into contextualizing today's conversation and jump into some pretty pointed questions. So, there, better? Excellent. So, Vanessa, after you.
Right. Good morning. Thank you all for having me. I'm super excited about this conversation. My name is Vanessa Cooksey. I serve as the President and CEO of the Regional Arts Commission. We will celebrate. Yeah, there's any artist in the room. Artists make the world better. We have been investing in artists and arts organizations for nearly 40 years. RAC was founded in 1985, and we use hotel motel sales tax to give grants to artists and arts organizations. We've invested over $100 million over the last 40 years to make St. Louis a great place to live, work, play, and visit. Many of your favorite arts organizations and artists benefit from our grants and programs. So I'm excited to talk about the impact of the arts, not only on community and economic development, but how it generates civic pride and community engagement here in the region.
Good morning. Good morning. There we go. I feel like a child in this chair. Not a bad feeling, but my feet are hitting the floor, thankfully. I'm Faith Sandler. I'm the Executive Director of the Scholarship Foundation of St. Louis. We are a 104-year-old organization in this community. Our mission in 1920 is consistent with our mission now, which is to build the community, fortify democracy, by way of higher education access for those without the financial means. Sounds simple, is not so simple. The majority of the funds that we distribute every year are now in the form of scholarship grants, and they are awarded on the basis of need as well as other criteria, and a small number of interest-free loans as well. We also provide, in addition to those awards, and let me say before I get too further along, those awards are made directly to the students, so that means money in the hand of the student, not to the institution. And those awards then are accompanied by advising services, guidance, navigation along the way. The path to and through college is fraught with challenges and decisions that young people need to make, sometimes without the information that would solidify their decisions. So we're there at those moments. And finally, advocacy, specifically advocacy on issues of higher education access and success that affect low-income students. So that's what we do. 600 or so students a year, $6 million in the form of direct aid to those students. So we are both philanthropy in that we're giving out money, and we are in relationship with regional philanthropy in that we would not be able to do as much as we're doing, as well as we're doing it, without the partnerships of our donors.
Kelvin Adams, CEO, President of the St. Louis Community Foundation since August 7, 2023. You may know me as the former superintendent of the St. Louis Public School District, where I tried to retire a year and a half ago. The St. Louis Community Foundation really connects purposeful philanthropic efforts with the community with the intent of creating long and short-term outcomes for the community. The foundation was formed in 1915, the second oldest in the country. We manage about 825 funds from donors with the intent of providing the dollars to nonprofits based on what they have in mind. The foundation manages about $526 million on an annual basis, and we give out approximately anywhere from $80 to $110 million a year based on the intent of the donor. I'm really excited because I had the board approve a new strategic plan on the 15th of December with the intent of being much more purposeful around supporting the community. The foundation has not always been aligned in that way, shape, or form, and so I'm just excited that we are going to put the word community back in the community foundation such that some meaningful outcomes can take place that are really critical to this community. So that's what I do, and that's what I'm really excited about.
All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Jennifer Bell, and I'm the Director of Financial Aid here at Webster University. I lead a very talented team of 12 professional financial aid staff, as well as 10 or so additional student staff that help us execute our day-to-day operations and mission. And really, I view the mission of the Financial Aid Office here at Webster as an extension of Webster University's mission to provide access to higher education affordably, and to educate students and their parents and families and other influencers on affordable pathways to higher education. Additionally, we leverage about $100 million annually in different types of financial resources, many of which are scholarships or interest-free loans that we help students locate and use to pay for their college experience here.
Thanks, Jennifer. I think it's probably important for the room, the Supreme Court ruling, can you go into a little bit more detail on what exactly is it? What is it meant? What does it mean?
Yeah, so the Supreme Court ruling that occurred on January 29th of 2023 really was related to primarily college admissions practices, race-based college admissions practices, but it has a trickle-down effect, particularly here at colleges and universities for university foundations and advancement offices and the financial aid office that trickles down to scholarships and particularly the criteria that we use to award them. So shortly after the affirmative action decision, the state of Missouri's Attorney General Bailey issued a statement effectively extending that affirmative action decision to race-based scholarships here in the state of Missouri. So what that's meant for us in the financial aid office is that we've had to go back and take a look at the criteria of many of the scholarships that we offer to students here at the university, both current and prospective. One of the scholarship, we've looked at both our institutional scholarships and endowed scholarship opportunities through our university advancement department. And we took a closer look with the guidance and direction of our university council staff at any scholarships that had race-based criteria. So the institutional scholarships, we proceeded to adjust some of the criteria that specifically articulated race, or even a proxy for race. For example, we had a scholarship that had criteria that was related or that was offering a scholarship opportunity to high school graduates that attended Webster University from North St. Louis and North County, which can be used as a proxy for race. So those scholarships, we went about adjusting them to articulate more of a demonstrated commitment to the concepts of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And beyond that, with our university advancement team, this is a team that works with all of our donor-funded scholarships. That team was charged with going back to any donors who had explicitly created a scholarship program to benefit students based on any racial or ethnic criteria and ask them to adjust their criteria so that it could be in line with the new affirmative action ruling and especially Attorney General Bailey's extension to scholarships of that particular ruling.
Thanks, Jennifer. And obviously, we're going to dive deeper into that with Faith in particular. But I think before we would talk about any changes that have been wrought by the ruling, it's important to hear from the panelists on what they feel is effective, inclusive philanthropy to start with. Vanessa?
What is unique about the Regional Arts Commission and our work is that we are publicly funded. And we were initially founded as an economic development organization to invest in tourism to attract visitors to St. Louis. And we just recently released some new data about the economic impact of the arts sector in St. Louis. There are about 700 arts and culture nonprofits in the region, and those 700 generated $860 billion in economic activity. We are almost a $1 billion industry. And so one of the things that we found from our research when we surveyed tourists, they want to come to St. Louis. More people come to St. Louis for our arts and culture than sports combined. And they come here because they see and experience things that resonate with them. If they don't see and experience things that resonate with them, they will go to other places. And so as a publicly funded institution, we have to have a variety of arts and culture experiences that not only benefit our residents, but also benefit our visitors here. And so the Regional Arts Commission has to look broadly in terms of what we're funding and the impacts that it has on our economic development and people's willingness to come. And so rulings like this, while they're focused on education and admissions, we have to think about what makes St. Louis attractive. People want to come to a community that is safe, that is beautiful, where they feel welcome, and where they can have fun. So I'm very grateful that our statute requires us to think more broadly about our philanthropy, and we're able to do that and make the kinds of grants to artists and arts organizations that make St. Louis attractive.
Thank you. Faith?
So the question is, what is effective, inclusive? So I think it is philanthropy that is done with and not for the people who benefit. So in conversation, in collaboration, and in relationship. I think it is a healthy, it's philanthropy that's done in a healthy learning environment where we respect each other's expertise and perspective and honor what we come into the room knowing. I think effective, inclusive philanthropy is when the respect for that expertise exceeds the power of the money. It's hard to raise money in a principled way in this environment, but I think effective, inclusive philanthropy allows us to maintain our morals and our principles even in incredibly challenging times. And finally, and most importantly, effective, inclusive philanthropy is about community benefit, not private interest.
Faith, we know each other for quite a long time. Have you ever turned down money?
Yes, we do turn down money. And you know what happens when we do? The donor on the other side of the table scowls and says, "Tell me more." It opens a conversation rather than closing a conversation. It takes time and dialogue, but part of what I think is our role as an organization is to influence and teach as a part of the giving relationship. And it has to be a relationship. It has to be a relationship. Ultimately, identifying what our common goals are, and then having the expertise to pave the path towards reaching them. Donors who come in saying, "I'm opposed to," let me just, radical example, but from the early morning conversation, "I'm opposed to illegal immigration." Let's talk about what you mean by that. Let's talk about who you're thinking about. Let's talk about how there is nothing illegal about that human being, nor the opportunity to provide and assist that human with the educational development they so richly deserve. I only want a scholarship based on merit. Let's talk about that. Does that mean you'd be all right if we wrote your check to Bill Gates' son? Well, no, I want it to make a difference. Great. What kind of difference do you want it to make? I want students to work hard for what they, okay, great. Let's talk about how we look for that in our applicants. And in the end, with very few exceptions, we end up with going from a no thank you to a yes, that's workable. Let's do that together. So,
Thanks, Faith. Dr. Adams?
So purposeful philanthropy from my and the community foundation's perspective is philanthropy that really focuses on the needs of the community in a very real, authentic way, based on the data, based on the information. When I arrived at the St. Louis Community Foundation, after a listening tour, the community said that the foundation was being viewed as elitist, in the sense that it was isolating itself to support donors who were targeting their dollars in ways that were not necessarily focused around the community. And so we marshaled a strategic plan to focus our efforts on convincing donors to think differently around what they support. And those things right now will be Youth Connections, which obviously deals with scholarships. We provided $1.9 million last year in scholarships, the notion of early child education and educational innovation. On the other side is economic mobility, the notion of housing, and making sure that the unhoused have opportunities. So philanthropic dollars targeted to support their needs, and nonprofits that are doing that in the area of impact investing, making sure that those persons who have interest in this community, opening businesses and those kinds of things, providing them resources that they could get low interest loans at 1% or 2%, such that they could open those businesses and impact their neighborhoods, but also impact their livelihood as well. And then this notion of wealth management, making sure, and this is not just about teaching people how to spend money that they don't have. This is about providing them dollars such that they can know how to manage those dollars in a real, authentic way. And so that's what purposeful philanthropy is responding to the needs of the community, the critical needs that we see every single day, and that we want to, and this is not in any way a disrespectfully comment, but we don't need to be providing more dollars to institutions that already have tons of dollars and not necessarily impacting the community. And so for me and for our organization moving forward, this notion of intentionality and understanding what the data says, whether it's the Ferguson report, which is the 9-year time period, and Starsky spoke last night on August the 9th, making sure that we are responding to what that report said, for the sake of all that Jason Purnell did, who's now presently running the McDonald Foundation, or this notion that we did ourselves of this notion of elitism. So I think from a philanthropic perspective, community foundations or philanthropy must be driven toward making a difference in the community, and a substantial difference, not necessarily impacting it in the way that we always have.
Dr. Adams, to stay with you, when you were the super, I'm sure you had many philanthropists, I know because I was one of them, that came to you with ideas and programs for the schools. Has your perception or point of view significantly changed in your short tenure?
You really want my answer?
Yeah. Of course.
As a community, we have not worked really well around partnerships. Over the last 6 months that I've been in place, I've met with 9 or 10 different foundations who have not collectively been working together to try to get national dollars to come into St. Louis in ways that they should, because we write grants that are targeted just for our own foundations, as opposed to collectively thinking about how we write national grants to Robert Woods Johnson, Kresge Foundations in a collaborative kind of way. I use that as an example to answer your question, because I believe we have way too many nonprofits that don't work collectively together or work collaboratively together to get the kind of results. So to answer your question is, what I've seen is the same thing I saw on the school board side. The notion that we have the same people doing the same kinds of things without talking to each other, and we're wasting dollars as we try to impact changes that if we talk to each other and leverage those dollars in a much more partnership, collaborative kind of way, we could really make some substantial difference in the real challenges that our community face. But I think that the issue here is this notion of collaboration. And part of my role, I see, from a community foundation perspective, is to force people to try to think differently around how they use these dollars, such that we don't have the same organization doing the same things and repeating the same thing over and over and over again, because they got a brand new idea that they heard about because they saw it on television. And yes, I want to address their passion for what the idea and the belief, but there are other organizations that are doing a similar kinds of thing that if they just simply ask the question, they can get real results in a way that would impact the lives of young people.
Thanks, Doctor. Jennifer.
Yeah, so in the financial aid office, we function a little bit differently. We're not so much involved in the philanthropic efforts, but more the stewardship of those efforts. So when I think about this concept from a financial aid perspective, I think of it as inclusive stewardship, partnering with staff, other departments at the university to make sure that we are inclusively providing opportunities for students, because we're no longer dangling this scholarship. We're no longer able to dangle this scholarship that says, hey, I'm talking to you, or this money is for you specifically. But really, universities, I think now will be charged with making sure that they are building more intentional partnerships with high schools, community-based organizations that are really speaking and educating students. Also making sure that your college or university is a good place for students that benefit from these programs, that ensures that this is a good place for them to be. So I think universities are really going to be placed in the position of putting their efforts where their mouth is, I should say, in terms of inclusive recruitment practices? Are you visiting the schools each year that have fewer resources, potentially? Are you building relationships with leaders within the community that have influence over the types of students that you're looking to recruit to the university? And are you pipelining? Are you offering opportunities that both build students in their journey to attend college, as well as make sure that they have a soft place to land once they get here? The idea of there just being money is no longer enough. We absolutely have to put more effort forth to make sure that we're shaping our incoming class to both get them to college and to retain them once they get here.
Thanks, Jennifer. Vanessa, let's move back to the ruling itself. I guess the question becomes two-part for all of you, which is, one, did it have any immediate impact on your operations as they were? And then two, community's been a part of the title of this panel. How do you explain your role, if at all, anything has changed? So again, what has the ruling meant right away, if anything at all, and then how do you talk about it for your constituents?
Thank you. In terms of the ruling, most directly, I think the impact is to the artists and how they choose to pursue their art through formal education and through entrepreneurship, and what access they have and how schools are recruiting students, portfolios, review, and or entrepreneurship, how we're funding creatives to create art. And so while RAC hasn't seen a direct impact on our work, one of the things that we have been doing since the pandemic, because of the impact on our revenues from the pandemic, is really looking more broadly at how we are providing access to our grant dollars to artists. Our grant application used to have well over 20 questions. It's 9. If we're not going to read the answer to the question, why are we asking it? What are we doing with this data? And are we ensuring that we make the entry points accessible? The other thing that we're looking very deeply at is the reporting. You know, particularly for artists and arts organizations, we don't need them spending more time on telling us what they did with the money than actually doing the work of creating and making their creativity available to residents and visitors. And so I think that what is important is for RAC to evaluate the process of how we're getting dollars. We used to spread our grant payments out over 18 months. Now we pay it all up front. So from the time you apply to the time you get paid is 6 months, and that's enough, right? And so I'm grateful for the impact of the pandemic on RAC, because it gave us an opportunity to stop and look at how we were doing our work and how we could make it better. The other thing that we're doing that I'm super excited about is, to Dr. Adams' point, really leveraging our power for the benefit of collaboration. We're doing much of our granting in cohort formations, where we have large arts organizations in the same room with smaller arts organizations having conversations, so that we can identify where there are synergies and where we can leverage our outreach to have even greater impact. And I think that's the role of a funder. If you see something that is not working and you have the ability to influence a change, that's part of the stewardship of those dollars.
Thank you. Faith?
I would like to say that the Supreme Court decisions, because at the end of June, 2 decisions dramatically affected the context of our work, not so much our work, but both on that same day, the denial of the student loan forgiveness program came down. So all at once, we had a world of spin out in the media and in the community that somehow the whole game had changed about higher education, and now no longer could we address race in our admissions or potentially in our scholarship or financial aid awards, and no longer could we promise students that they wouldn't be so over-leveraged and indebted that it wouldn't pay off for them no matter how they started or ended the process. So that happened at the end of June, and the biggest impact was like a punch to the gut. And then I did something I recommend each of you do if you have not. Sit down and read the whole decision for yourself. Don't read the headlines. Don't read the analysis. Go read the actual decision, because those of you in higher education will come to see that it's not really, it is a very specific and targeted question that's answered there. And it is about the most elite, expensive, exclusive institutions in the country. So while it's devastating and we don't love it, at the Scholarship Foundation, we can still say we are all about equity, and we define equity at the intersection of race and class. If all of our awards are made on the basis of need, in this community anyway, we don't have any problem explaining why 2/3 of our students are Black or brown. No problem. They are all qualified. They're all qualified. So the decision itself, and Starsky said this last night, if any of you heard him, the decision really provided cover for institutions and corporations to do what they had already begun to do, which is roll back any affirmative actions. I don't mean affirmative action as a program. I mean actions that they had begun to take or describe in DEI efforts after the murder of George Floyd that escalated the issue in the public sphere. But beginning of June, that had already been rolled back so much that by the time the Supreme Court decision came out, it just allowed this like fire sale on let's get rid of everything that even mentions race or racism in our institutions and our public sphere. And so the thing I really want is rooms like this to do not fall for that. Just do not fall for that. Go read the decision yourself and know specifically what it does and does not allow. Because we're all being taken by the spin. And by spin, I would include, the Attorney General as well. He's sending, you see it on the news. He's sending down rules, memos, letters, prohibiting things he probably could not stand behind in a court of law. And he is our Attorney General. So the real battle is race and class. This decision does not prohibit scholarships on the basis of need. Need and race still intersect quite significantly in this country. It does not require test scores in admissions, although they're starting to roll back put test scores back into the mix because they want to make a claim that those are objective measures for the outcomes and ways to sort people by merit to award scholarships. And finally, it does not speak to equal or equitable treatment on campus. Once students are on campus, in student services and in the support we owe them, the Supreme Court decision does not prohibit us from doing that work with students in affinity groups like students of color, students with ethnic affinities, or LGBTQ students. We still need to be doing that work right here, right now, probably twice as hard as we were before the decision.
Thank you, Faith. Dr. Adams?
So I guess there were three groups that we needed to address. Number one was the board, because obviously the board had heard about the ruling and wanted to know what would be our response. And so it's about really educating the board. That's number one. Number two, the education of our donors, such that they would be aware of what the ruling really said or didn't say. And thirdly, we only had a minimal change. I think Faith kind of framed it really well. And that was this notion of using the word marginalized, which obviously covers Black and brown families to a great degree. And so that was the only change that we really made in two grants that we received. Other than that, nothing changed. But it was really about educating ourselves, educating our board, and educating our donors such that we knew what flexibility we had. But it was a really, once we did the education piece, as Faith indicated, read the ruling, then you know kind of what ability you have to navigate. But we had very little challenges as it relates to having to change anything that we were doing.
Dr. Adams, to your earlier point, though, is now, therefore, a time to mobilize around the challenge that you see. You talked about evolving the Community Foundation in St. Louis to be more for the community. Is now that moment because of these challenges like the Supreme Court has presented?
I think it's the Supreme Court may have given us, I don't want to call it a blessing in disguise, but I think it will force us to think differently around how we are addressing what we know to be addressed anyway. And so from my perspective, as I leverage other foundations, I've visited 7 foundations since I've been in this particular role: Atlanta, Cleveland, Columbus. And what I'm finding from a national perspective, because there are 800 foundations across the United States that give out about $40 billion, I'm finding that all of us are thinking differently around how we need to be strategic, or much more strategic than we've had to be before. Because as Faith has so adequately stated, the media puts a lot of spin on things, and people don't do the real work to read the details. And once you read the details, you see that, okay, all right, I'll change something here, but for the most part, I could continue to do what I was doing before to support the community that has the greatest need. So that's kind of how we have looked at it. It's really about just being much more intentional around educating ourselves and educating those persons in the foundation spaces such that they could have the flexibility to do what they were doing before, but just being smart around addressing what might be some pending litigation based on language.
Thank you, Doctor. Jennifer.
Yeah, I shared a little bit of the impact earlier about how Webster has navigated this decision. But yesterday, specifically, one of the scholarships whose criteria that we adjusted as a result of this decision, the Dr. Donald M. Suggs Scholarship, which previously was a full tuition scholarship that had some more explicit racial and ethnic criteria, we adjusted to invite applicants that had a demonstrated commitment to the concepts of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And what we found as a result is that we had a wonderfully diverse, in a lot of ways, applicant pool. The vast majority, due to a lot of the outreach that we've done to invite applicants this year, were still students who identified as a racial or ethnic minority, but it also invited some allyship as well. We heard and we had finalists yesterday that were white students that had demonstrated their commitment to diversity, equity, or inclusion, or advancing those concepts in some way. We also heard from students that identified as LGBTQIA, and we heard from students that had a documented disability, and because of their disability, it made them more aware of other types or other groups of marginalized individuals. So from that perspective, I feel like Webster really took this opportunity to talk more about its mission, to double down on its mission, to meet unmet needs, and to reach students that other institutions are not intentionally reaching out to. So that's just one example, and I feel like it's too early in some ways to predict how all of this will play out going forward. We don't know what our incoming class will look like. We haven't heard any feedback yet from our candidates, but it's been really refreshing to see how institutions can really rise to the occasion to continue to meet the needs of students with these scholarships in the way that they were originally intended, and then some.
Thanks, Jennifer. A question for you. Dr. Adams mentioned collaboration earlier. You know, in the wake of the ruling, and to the best of your knowledge, but did Webster and Wash U and SLU and Harris Stowe, did you all come together and start to think about how to collectively act to help students and their families navigate all of this?
We didn't have a ton of collaboration across institutions. The institutions in the St. Louis metro area are incredibly diverse in their mission and the way their resources and the ways in which they go about recruiting students. I do know that all of these institutions have adjusted in some way, although that might look different. There are some institutions that I've seen double down on their tuition guarantee programs, for example, to broaden their criteria in some way, to expand their access. But it really just sort of depends institution to institution.
Sure, thank you. Faith, to jump to you real quick, because you're navigating not just this, but the mess which is FAFSA right now, and the federal government's inability to seemingly act in the right way around that. You know, and for what it's worth, I work for Edward Jones, and there's 55,000 people that work for Edward Jones with a desire to go further, right? If we don't have an educated population that's inclusive, we will not be successful. So when I often listen to panelists like this, and Faith in particular, who we actually partner with, we're keenly interested. And I think it is interesting, and one of our panelists mentioned this as well. There's an interesting report, and if I find it, I'll send it back over to this group too. The commitments made in the wake of George Floyd's murder and the actual money that's gotten out of the door to support those commitments, as you might imagine, there's a discrepancy there, right? And why is that amongst corporations? Why have they not been able to effectively deploy significant promises is a really interesting thing. It's a shared responsibility. Corporations play a significant role in this space, and I'm sure for all of you that are paying attention on LinkedIn and what other places, corporations and their DEI programs are really being scrutinized right now and being accused of pulling back. And I'm not sure that's always true, but it's really a mixed bag right now. So sorry, Faith, that was a bit of an aside. But FAFSA, the Supreme Court ruling, again, how are you all navigating this?
In case you're not aware, FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. I'm thinking also of our international audience, may not be familiar. It is the gateway to any need-based aid in the United States. It has been wholly revamped. It was in 2023, so probably 3 months late in getting out to the students. So should have gone out October 1st. It was December 29th, and when it went out, it was full of bugs, glitches, and locked doors for many populations of students, people who just could not complete the form because of programming errors, basically. Over the weeks that followed, we also learned that the Department of Education neglected to program into the FAFSA 3 years worth of inflation into the formula. So this is the gateway to anyone who has financial need in this country who wants to continue their education beyond high school. And it is still not functioning properly, nor is the data being delivered yet to institutions or offices like the department that Jennifer runs. And everything that affects our students, and hopefully the students you care about, is at peril right now because of this. So between student loans are not going to be forgiven, between affirmative action is over, good luck to you all. And by the way, we've made this gateway impossible for you to pass through in a timely manner. Will mean both a dramatic reduction in the Black, brown, and low-income students who get into school. And then once they're there, they are very highly likely to be underfunded and overcharged for what they're getting. So for me, obviously, this is a point of great passion because it's all about community, it's all about philanthropy, it's all about what kind of economy we might have, and it's all about diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Thanks, Faith. Vanessa, a question for you. So you all support artists of all ages and stages. Do you have to grant differently and screen differently and support differently based off of what you perceive the needs to be in this environment and in sort of future environments?
Absolutely. We are making adjustments so to ensure that these public funds get to artists, whether it's a shorter application. We adjust our dollar amounts accordingly to support artists and arts organizations, and really being thoughtful about what art does. And I would like to comment quickly on so much of what we're experiencing has to do with the decision of our elected officials. Elected officials, right? And or appointed officials who are appointed by elected officials. And when we think about the role of the arts in movement building, in challenging status quo, in sense making for policy, whether it's visual arts or performing arts, I am heartened by this conversation because there is something that we can do. We can engage, and I think that this is a moment for philanthropies to support advocacy work and educating people, the citizenry, on the policies that are being made by who? Elected officials.
Thank you. Dr. Adams, can a community foundation effectively work with a major corporation?
Oh, yes. Wow, yes, indeed, 100%, yes, yes, yes. The only thing the community foundation has not done, at least in my tenure, at least in the history, we've not gone after federal grant dollars. There are a number of reasons why, but we have not gone after federal grant dollars. But everybody else, anything else, we will take your money tomorrow. Yeah. Yes, so yes, we can.
Excellent. I guess staying with that point, what does effective partnership with corporate America look for all of you right now? Because it's a huge part of what needs to happen going forward.
I'll jump in first. I think first it's really about awareness. I think the corporate partners need to understand clearly the conditions, and this sounds like we should already know this already, but the conditions of the community. And I have a real challenge in understanding that they really do understand the conditions that are the lived experience of people in the community. And so I think that has to be done first to make them aware. Then secondly, I think they need to be challenged around leveraging their philanthropic dollars to support the community based upon the data of the community, not based on anything else but the data. But when you look at the data speaks clearly to the notion of marginalization around housing, around crime, all of those factors. We can look at it over and over and over again. I think they need to be challenged around that piece. I think they can still do the kind of philanthropic efforts they want in other areas, but I think it's initially the efforts needs to be targeted around the community that they actually receive the benefit of their companies progressing in first. And then I think it's once the awareness comes in, then I think it's about, and Starcy kind of spoke to this last night as well, then they have to be challenged. They really have to be challenged. And, you know, from Starcy's perspective, which I don't necessarily disagree with, it's really the young people who have to do the challenging. It's going to be that group that really pushes the envelope to really change what needs to happen for the corporate community to really stand up and make the kind of difference that they need to make. February 26, 2012, Trayvon Martin was killed. It started the Black Lives Matter movement. That movement started with the young people in the street crying out for what they thought they needed to have. And I think that's the same kind of effort that needs to take place with pushing the corporate community to do things that they would not otherwise do without somebody being on their doorstep to, I don't want to use the word force, but encourage them to do something differently.
Thank you, Doctor.
I just wanted to jump in. The value of partnering with an organization like RAC for corporations is public-private partnership. We have invested these public dollars over 40 years, and so we know what works. We've been able to sustain through market ups and downs, and that's why we have a world-class arts and culture community here, whether it's the performing arts through our symphony, our theaters, or visual arts through our museums. And so corporations can rest assured that our stewardship of public dollars has a lot more accountability, whether it's sunshine laws or just the statute as a whole. But public-private partnerships effectively allow corporations to invest in a lower risk environment. And that helps our dollars and our impact go farther and really be able to measure the impact. So in partnering with private philanthropy, I think there's an element of being able to invest in innovation, and in partnering through public philanthropy and public-private partnerships, there's less risk and greater measurement of the impact.
Thank you. Faith.
I think, just to add to what my colleagues said and not repeat, yes, of course, and both the challenge and the holding each other accountable as part of the partnership. So our best corporate donors are looking for data that proves the point. They like stories too, but we better be able to show them the numbers. That holds us accountable, and we've learned a lot by producing that data, a lot about ourselves, asked questions about ourselves we might not have asked quite so quickly had we not been pushed. The money's great. The leadership and visibility is also great. So in the same way, the corporate DEI panel before this one said, who's at the top and how they reflect our DEI goals is everything to the success. Same is true in corporate philanthropy, especially in the DEI environment. So just as an example, we launched a new scholarship last year, thanks to Edward Jones. 75 students were awarded up to $12,000 per year, renewable for 5 years. It was not a race-based scholarship. However, when all the students and their families assembled at headquarters for Edward Jones headquarters for lunch at the company, with the company's people walking by going, what in the world is going on here? 73 of the 75 were black or brown. And we stood proudly behind the photograph of those students, as did the managing partner of the firm, who not only sent them a word of encouragement to apply, but then addressed them personally from the stage that day, congratulating them on their accomplishments and what they will undoubtedly do to build our community.
Thanks, Faith. Jennifer, any thought on corporate partnerships?
I'd say generally it's really outside of what the financial aid office does, but I know that our university advancement department certainly works through a number of corporate partnerships to benefit not only students from a scholarship perspective, but pipelining programs and also initiatives that support student success. I don't want to speak for our university advancement department, but certainly as they engage in those conversations, I know that benefiting the students that we have here at Webster, almost half of which identify as a racial or ethnic minority, are a top priority as they navigate those conversations and hopefully build a pipeline to these organizations as well, and employment opportunities that Webster graduates can benefit from.
That's exactly right. I've got a few more questions, but I think it'd be really important to hear from all of you. I'm sure you've got many questions for these amazing panelists. So I'll end with this, and then we can hopefully turn it over to all of you to ask the panelists what is on your mind. But going down this row here, what gives you hope?
Individuals, one of the things that I just thought about, this is an opportunity for people to get involved. We have to remember that, when you look at the Giving USA chart that shows the source of philanthropic dollars, it comes from people just like you that are watching and are in this room. A good majority of philanthropic dollars. So we have an opportunity to invest in and support the communities that make a difference. So just that's something that I'm really excited about, is how do we get individuals engaged in supporting our communities through their personal philanthropy.
Oops, I have my own, sorry. The last panel, one person said one of the perks of her job at Caleres was free shoes. The biggest perk of my job, and I'm going to try not to choke up telling you, is watching young people organize and activate on campuses for what they need and what they deserve. I get to stand in the back just because I'm like the mother hen. No one, I'm gonna be in the room, but not at the front, and watch young people figure out together, what is this moment? How can we make our demands? How can we be sure in a student movement just like ones we've seen come before this one and that Starsky addressed last night? I saw this at Lincoln University, where they are grieving the loss of a black woman who was bullied out of her job and out of her life at that campus. And the students are gonna change that campus. The students will, not the administrators, certainly not the curators, not the press. The students are not gonna go away until they are heard.
So I can't disagree with Faith at all. It's the thing I miss in the role I am now, is not seeing kids every single day. And so my faith and what gives me hope is young people, just that simple. Black, brown, no matter what the color is, young people really care deeply about this country. They care deeply about what's happening in this country, and they are the ones that are going to really make the difference. I like old people as well, because I'm one of them. But the reality is the young people that Starsky so eloquently spoke about, that really will make the difference, and that's what gets me excited every single day.
Ditto also to what Faith said, but Gen Z is really something else. And you really cannot pull the wool over their eyes. They're just woke. They are. And even as I talked earlier about how we adjusted our criteria for the Dr. Donald M. Suggs Scholarship, which was previously a scholarship that was for students that had some racial or ethnic criteria associated with it. We actually had white students reach out to the financial aid office, the admission office, the chief diversity office, and say, hey, I saw the criteria for this scholarship, and from what I understand, this used to be a scholarship for students that identify as a racial or ethnic minority. And I'm not that. And I know that there are some legalities around the reasons that Webster has adjusted this scholarship, and I don't want to take a scholarship that was intended for students that are black or brown or a racial or ethnic minority. And just that level of awareness was huge for me. That level of empathy, that level of wanting to preserve something that, us old folks were not able to do, just gives me a lot of hope for the future, a lot of hope for how this new generation will conduct themselves, will create policy, will advocate and organize and march. Yeah, they just blow me away every day. But yeah, I would say the students are what give me hope.
Great, thank you. Questions?
Hi, I'm Juanita Hyam, and I don't actually have a question. I just have an observation. I'm a little curious when I look up at this expert panel why the women were referred to by their first name, but the man was referred to by a title. I don't know what the intentionality was behind that, but it does leave an impression on us, the audience members.
Oh, that's my mistake. No intentionality in the absence of that, so I apologize.
Can I speak to that? I've never had this conversation with my colleague, but when you're the superintendent of schools and people call you by your first name, I think that's dramatic disrespect when you have a doctorate. So I'm going to call Dr. Adams, wherever he is, even when he's not any longer the superintendent of school. Because if I sat in way too many meetings, this is going to be blunt, with philanthropists who felt like they could call a person who's given their life and all of that stress to running a public school system in tumultuous times by his first name. And I just can't cotton to that. I'm fine with my first name. I don't know about my colleagues, but that's
I don't have a
the way
doctorate yet.
I think of Dr. Adams.
I think that that is a very, very valid, and let's definitely give the respect due. I just want to make a comparison to the last group that also had a PhD panelist in it. Very different, but from the experience. So I will recognize that. But the work for that higher degree was equal. So I don't mean to take any respect away from the very deserving Dr.
Just say
Adams.
Kelvin. I'm good with Kelvin. No doctor, just Kelvin.
Any other questions or observations?
Hello. This is actually kind of directed toward you, and I'm afraid to say your name now, Vanessa.
Please say Kelvin. Please. Kelvin.
Okay, Dr. Adams. No, anyway.
Kelvin. I want to answer if you say Dr. Kelvin.
I'm just curious because I've watched the work that you've done with the Regional Arts Commission and empowering our artists to seek and to ask. And I'm just curious what it feels like, I guess, to see many of the young hip-hop artists specifically. I don't know why I'm tearing up, but actually getting a voice in St. Louis, as much of a voice as the opera singers and the Philharmonic, orchestra and so forth, and really seeing that level of talent coming to the top.
It's exciting. We have so much talent in this region, and I agree with my colleagues. Young people are going to do it, and it is our job to provide the resource, the guidance, and the support for them to succeed and win, and that has been consistent throughout our history. And so to have the opportunity to invest in young artists, whether they be hip-hop, visual artists, performing artists, is really part of the legacy building and the institutional investment in our humanity and our healing, because that's something else I'm excited about, the art that young people are creating. There's a real through line of healing, which we need. And so I'm just honored and blessed to be able to invest.
Hi, I'm Jesse. I work in student success at Pittsburgh State University in Pittsburgh, Kansas, and I really just had a clarifying question in terms of scholarships. I was a first-generation college student from a low-income family, and I'm very grateful for the scholarships that I received, and so now that I'm in a position, I give back. specifically for first-generation students. I'm curious, just with a lot of these funds are coming from like private donors, and I recognize the funds have to be distributed from the university, but if somebody wanted to give money from an identity that they resonate with closely, why does that need to be changed? Like, I don't know if I'm asking, okay.
I think just one thing to say is that you can create scholarships at the St. Louis, or any community foundation likely, or at an organization like the Scholarship Foundation of St. Louis. So it does not have to go through the university. Many people choose the university because that is their loyalty, but the scholarships primarily that our organizations award are not specific to a particular institution. So, and in terms of first generation, there is nothing discriminatory or specific to any race associated with that phrase. And so you can certainly create scholarships that are limited to first generation students. Just be sure to work on what you mean by first generation with whomever you're giving the money to. But I would encourage you to keep thinking about how to do that, and I'm grateful that it comes to mind.
I have a comment from online as well as a question. And so Seth from online, I believe in response to your observation, wrote, "Thank you to the audience member for bringing that up. It's too often not noticed by those not impacted." The question from Erica is, were there legal ramifications that led to the decision to include locations, e.g. North Missouri, as a proxy for race in the reexamination of the scholarship funding? If not, why was the proxy also included if it wasn't mandatory?
I would say that, you know, when you're referring to particular geographic locations, for example, at a previous institution, which was a public institution that purposely sort of shied away from race-based scholarships, but they did want to use scholarship programs as a way to encourage a more diverse student population. I was, after all, in the state of Iowa at this point, but they targeted students with their scholarships from specific areas, one of which was Gary, Indiana, which, if any of you are familiar with Gary, Indiana, that population is overwhelmingly Black. The probability that you will not get Black applicants from that area or Black recipients from an application pool in that area is very, very low. Another area that they targeted was San Antonio, Texas, specifically related to our groups of Latinx students. But that is one of the many ways that universities have historically sort of skirted around racial or ethnically based scholarship criteria, limitations or restrictions to still accomplish their goals. So when we're talking about a scholarship program for students in North St. Louis or North County, I would say that that similar assessment extends to that group of students. North County and North St. Louis is a predominantly Black population, and the probability that you would not get a critical mass of Black students within that scholarship pool could again be interpreted as a proxy for race and opens organizations and colleges and universities up to scrutiny or potentially even some legal action. So that is why we had been advised to not specifically target areas of the city in efforts to recruit our minority student population here at Webster.
Can I just respectfully talk back a little bit, Jennifer? I'm not certain North County, because that's a wide geography. Is it, unless your council or your financial aid office considers that a euphemism for Black, I'm not sure demographically it necessarily is. So that's one thing. And then I think the second thing is that we have scholarships and other forms of grant making that are specific to zip codes. Those too might be considered analogous to race, but they're actually drawn on the basis of income. Household financial characteristics that put the most intense and layered need in some zip codes in our region. And it's a geography that is objective. So I would, if I could wave a wand, I'd go back to the lawyer and push a little bit.
Point taken. Thank you, Faith. And I'll also add, part of this related to North County is my ignorance as a relatively new resident of St. Louis and St. Louis County.
We have time for about one or two more.
Thanks. I'm from China, so I'm a student here. Right now, I'm thanks for Jennifer and Cinnamon give me some scholarship from our university, around 15%. I think this is maximum for the international students. Right now, I and my husband also in the U.S. right now, and because for the international students, we need to go to the F1 and then to apply H1B. Then we can just apply find some job for the the legal requirement. So right now, me and my husband, also the students, and he is a student in the SLU University. Right now, we are no income within 2 years. So we want to know, and also we are not very young. I'm almost 40. Yeah, because I'm working in China several years. So I would like to know for this kind of situation from Asia, include China and Indian. So and both of the two couple or husband and wife, they are all both students. How can if they can apply some scholarship from your community or organization? Yeah, thanks.
Do you have scholarships you want to speak to?
Oh, yeah, I think one of the scholarships that she articulated was one that we already offer. And generally, we offer scholarships up to 20% of tuition for our graduate international students. But I think what you were asking about were additional resources that you could apply for through the community foundations and things like that. Yeah.
So at the Scholarship Foundation of, I don't have good news for you. Let me start with that. At the Scholarship Foundation of St. Louis, our basic premise is building this community, the St. Louis metropolitan regional community. So our requirement on our applicants, a couple years ago, because we had reason to be concerned about some of our records, we no longer required citizenship. We don't inquire about citizenship on our application, but we do require that individuals who apply to us live in this region 2 or more years independently of going to school in order to apply for our scholarships or our interest-free loans. And that, again, goes to the sort of the building of this particular geography and this community. So that means maybe you could apply, but it sounds like you've been in school the whole time you've been here, yeah? Okay.
I just want to add a quick point to that in terms of what that means as our civic leaders are looking to bring people from other places and the need for collaboration and thinking things through from start to finish, because there's unintended consequences and policies that are set up that once people get here, they can't get the resources that they need. And so this just speaks to how we have to take it one step further as we look at collaborations and think about the impacts of the decisions that we're making at all levels.
Yeah, for the community foundation, your ethnicity would not be a factor in terms of receiving a scholarship. Really, a lot of donors target things like someone going to be a nurse, someone working to be a teacher, those kind of criteria. So the ethnicity would not play any part of it, and you would be able to apply to scholarships based upon the criteria that would be established by the donor. So there may be some possibilities depending upon what you are majoring in. So those may be some factors. So if I get your information, I can provide it to the person who manages our scholarships and then provide some information for you.
I'm actually going to pose the final question to both you, Faith and Kelvin. Out of respect, it's Dr. Adams. Can we create a scholarship through the scholarship foundations or community foundations for a specific university with certain criteria?
100% yes.
Maybe. It really depends. So a difference between our organizations is that Dr. Adams, sorry, my colleague, the scholarships are created with donor intent differently at the community foundation than at the scholarship foundation. So anyone who creates a scholarship at the scholarship foundation must set criteria that are within our board-approved criteria that have to do with how we meet our mission in this community. So as long as it didn't violate that criteria, absolutely yes.
Excellent, thank you. I want to touch just for a quick moment on the conversation of titles and whatnot. And I stand here in my positionality as a black man, and I understand the work, as someone who is all but dissertation myself, the importance of titles and recognition of that work, particularly when we look at it through a lens of race and other identities. So to be a black man going through the educational system of the United States of America, to be able to achieve the status of doctor is significant, as it is for all. Let me be clear on that. But I am also very clear about what it means to be a black man to have the title of doctor and to have earned a PhD or an EDD or whatever. I also appreciate Faith's understanding of that and being able to call that out as well. That's what allyship looks like.
And I have a master's, but do not call me master.
That we shall not do. Again, from positionality here as a black man. But thanks again to our moderator, David, and our wonderful, esteemed panelists here for such an insightful discussion. I think we all have learned a lot in the last hour. Please do not forget to post on your social media platforms and use the hashtag Webster DEI, or scan, and also scan this QR code. We were up and running with our QR codes. We'd like for some feedback relative to this session. Thank you. We're gonna break for an hour for lunch. The Blues-fired pizza truck is parked outside, waiting for you at the top of this stairwell right here. You're welcome to purchase from it. You're welcome to visit a grab-and-go cafe for sandwiches and salads in the adjoining building. Our colleagues will show you that way. Our staff and students are happy to help in that regard. The refreshment area, as you all have found, has plenty of complimentary healthy snacks. Our next session starts at 1:15. Thank you very much.